Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here on Saturday, the 27th of June. Coaching changes don't help the Warriors. More coronavirus positive tests. The Women's World Cup could be the biggest event New Zealand has held, and ex-All Black says that the All Blacks have the advantage over the Kangaroos. Yes, you are starting the day the best way, up to date with all the important sports news here on New Zealand Sports Radio. And let's get straight into it with that football news. And yes, the FIFA Women's World Cup has been described by a mega event here in New Zealand. And it could be bigger than the Rugby World Cup and the Cricket World Cups that have been held here. The Women's World Cup last time apparently drew a TV audience of 1.12 billion people when it was held in France. That's 150 more than the Rugby World Cup drew in Japan. It is a very, very big event, televised on TV anyway, and it's looking at creating $100 million in income from travellers, etc., into New Zealand. So looking forward to that in 2023. A lot of planning to go ahead for that. Over in the Belarusian League, which is becoming less and less popular for me, as Energex beats Slavia 5-0. Wow, a big win there. Smolovic also beats Sluts 2-1. Yes, my team going down yet again in that one. That sees Energex climb back up to third in the table, but obviously we have the rest of the games to go this weekend. Yes, Hugh, our regular watcher, listener, and also shoot Slavia, his team has gone down there 5-0. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Moving on then to our birthdays. I'm going to hand you over to Stephen.
Well, good morning, Paul, and good morning to everybody. Welcome to the new weekend of the year. In birthdays today, a former professional basketball player, coach and television host, a former Chiefs player who ended up playing for the Brave Blossoms, and finally a former Warrior and a Kiwi international. And that's where we get things underway this morning. Louis Anderson, born this day, the 27th of June 1985, is a rugby league player and former Kiwi Rugby League international forward. He previously played for New Zealand Warriors in the National Rugby League competition and for the Catalan Dragons and Warrington Wolves in Super League. Moving on, Murray Williams, born this day, the 27th of June 1982, is a former rugby union player. A fly half, Williams notably played for Bay of Plenty in the National Provincial Championship and the Chiefs in Super Rugby. He played for the New Zealand Colts between 2002 and 2003 and has represented Japan at international level, where he was a member of their 2011 World Cup squad. And finally, Brendan Pongia, born this day, the 27th of June 1969, is a New Zealand former professional basketball player who played 14 seasons in the NBL. He is also a television presenter, having co-hosted Good Morning, a stalwart of the National Basketball League through the 90s. Pongia earned greatest recognition in 2001 as a member of the Tall Black squad that defeated Australia to qualify for the 2002 FIBA World Championship. And that's it for birthdays today. I'll be back shortly with league news.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And over in the rugby union, and Freya Bosiger, who played obviously for the All Blacks and then also played in rugby league for Wigan Warriors, has come out and said that the All Blacks could be innovative against the Kangaroos, and they could load their team with loose forwards who are large and athletic ball carriers. He said you could even have a whole team of loosies if you wanted to. That would be an interesting way to play against the Kangaroos. I can't see the All Blacks taking that route just purely as this is, let's be honest, a money generating event. It's not really a sporting event per se, and they'll be looking at having a lot of their stars in there. But Frank Bostic is saying that, look, yes, you could do that. Someone like Scott Barrett would, he says, be very well. He's big and mobile, and he's a big boy who could just truck the ball up. So yes, but he says injuries have to be taken into account here because look, putting league props up against union props would be a recipe for disaster in scrums. So yes, it's got to be whatever laws they play by have got to be adapted for that. Moving on to netball news, and the Tactics beat the Magic over last night, 45-36, to pick up their second win of the season, and yes, making it a longer season for the Magic, who have just got one win so far. This evening, the Steel will be taking on the Mystics, looking to get their first win of the season, whereas the Mystics will be looking at keeping the pressure on the Central Pulse at the top of the table. And I'm going to hand you over to Stephen, who's going to take us through our league update.
Yeah, Paul, if you're a Warriors supporter, I suggest you probably turn and look away, because a change of coach for the Warriors seems to have made no difference, because Melbourne have wasted no time in making themselves at home in Sydney, wiping the floor with the Warriors 56 at Stratus Jubilee Stadium after 2 days being forced to leave Victoria indefinitely due to a spike in coronavirus cases in Victoria. The Storm ran in 9 tries to snap a 2-game losing run. Suliasi Vunivalu netted a hat-trick. Ryan Pappenhausen and Paul Momirovsky nabbed 2 each, while Jerome Hughes tallied 4 try assists. The Warriors, playing in their first match since the shock sacking of Stephen Kearney, simply had no answers for a ruthless Melbourne attack. The victory for Melbourne may have come at a cost, however, with star first 5 Cameron Munster suffering a suspected right knee injury. Munster was caught awkwardly in a Carl Walton tackle in the 4th minute last night and played out the rest of the half, but was interchanged at half-time. The setback comes a week before the Storm's blockbuster clash with 2-time defending premiers, the Sydney Roosters, where Craig Bellamy's men will stage the game, where the game remains, where it's going to be staged, remains unclear, with the club looking at shifting to a base in Brisbane and playing at a Suncorp Stadium. We'll have to see how that unfolds. Despite the one-sided scoreline, the early signs were promising for the Warriors, who themselves had spent almost 2 minutes away from home due to international travel restrictions. Todd Payton's side had 20 plays inside the opposition 20-metre zone compared to the Melbourne's none inside the opening 15 minutes, but had nothing to show for it. Twice they were denied on opposite corners in the opening 7 minutes before a 60-metre kick return from Josh Adokar ended in Miramoski's first try. It was all one-way traffic thereafter, with Vunivalu, Pappenhausen, Momirovsky with his second try in the first game for the club, all crossing in a 7-minute blitz. Warriors winger Patrick Herbert finally got his team on the score sheet when he scored 2 minutes into the second half. However, the Storm were unmoved, with Pappenhausen completing his brace 3 minutes later and Vunivalu adding 2 more in the space of 3 minutes. Brandon Smith and Adokar completed the rout for the Storm, who also had Christian Welsh fail a concussion test. That final score again, Melbourne 50, the New Zealand Warriors 6. So yeah, the first 10 or so minutes was pretty good from the Warriors, and they looked like they were in for a solid performance, but it wasn't to be. Now, second game last night, the NRL will conduct an independent check of Bankwest Stadium on Saturday morning after Sydney Roosters lost 2 players to season-ending knee injuries in their win over St George Illawarra. Luke Keary starred for the Roosters with a stellar second half performance in the 22-12 victory after they were reduced to 15 men after 22 minutes. But the story of the night was the injuries. Less than 24 hours out from Saturday night's clash between Parramatta and Canberra, Victor Radley and Sam Verilis went down untouched in the opening 22 minutes, with the ground looking patchy following its recent heavy workload. The Roosters fear both have suffered season-ending torn anterior cruciate ligament injuries, and yeah, those are definitely, had one of those, they are definitely season-ending. Coach Trent Robinson rubbish reports that they had made a formal complaint, more concerned about the welfare of his two players down 12-10 early in the second half. It appeared they could be set for their first loss since the competition's resumption. But it was standoff Luke Keary who stepped up. The former South Sydney playmaker had the Roosters back on top when he grubbed for Brett Morris to score in the 52nd minute before doing it all himself in the 66th minute to give his team control. Keary then put the icing on the cake with a pinpoint perfect kick for Morris to complete a hat-trick in the dying minutes after the winger also gave the Roosters the first. Joseph Manu, deputising for Desco at fullback, also had one of the plays of the season early in the game. He chased through his own bomb to leap high and take the ball from Matt Duffy before flicking it to Wairea Hargraves to score. Must admit, Wairea Hargraves is playing some very good footy. It was really incredible, some of the performances out there, Robinson said. I'm proud of them, and I've got no idea if the surface contributed to the injuries. That's not for me to judge, but they obviously thought about it later in the piece. So that final score again, the Sydney Roosters just continuing on their merry way by 22 points to 12. Now, coming up in games later today, we have 3 games to reach your appetite. I'm listening to the rain outside falling. The 5 p.m. games see the North Queensland Cowboys host the Newcastle Knights at Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville, followed by the Brisbane Broncos hosting the Gold Coast Titans at Suncorp Stadium. It's at 7:30 p.m. And our final game sees Parramatta Eels hosting the Canberra Raiders at Bankwest Stadium. Kickoff is at 9:35 p.m. So just remembering all those games are New Zealand time, and it is bucketing down cats and dogs here in the West Auckland suburbs, Paul. So that rain that's duly needed for the dam that's only about 10k away from here is going to be a good thing, I've got to say. Paul, just on the Warriors, you just mentioned before, that was quite the hammering they took last night, but already a little bit of not so much dissent in the camp, but maybe a couple of the players just missing home and missing family.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we can hear the rain in the background on your end. We've had plenty of rain here up in the Coromandel overnight as well. I just caught a news headline saying that some players are considering going home to New Zealand if their families cannot join them out in Australia. Now, that was one of the things that was reported as being they would get there as quickly as possible after they left, didn't they? And what are we now? A month or so in before?
Yeah.
So they're taking a long time to get their families out there, which I think is pretty poor on the Warriors and the NRL's part. Look, by all reports, the players like the ex-coach. None of them have come out and said how they needed a restart. So, yeah, you can see all these things add up, don't they? When you're in, especially when you're away from home for that length of time.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like one heck of a
moving on then
at the time, Paul. But once again, when the team's not travelling so well, your coach gets fired. All these things build, and I just think that's what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, you got to say also for that coach, how much was he holding the team together, and how much did he actually have time to concentrate on winning games? So I think it's showing that it's a poor move by the Warriors, by probably people who weren't a decision by people who weren't actually in the camp, because it was made by the owners who were trying to making a decision from distance, which probably is not a good place to be making that decision. Moving on then in the Sal's NBL, no games on Friday evening, but this evening we have the Auckland Huskies versus the Manawatu Jets, 2 teams that have yet to win a game. So it's the first time that at least one more team will get a win on the board. that's followed up by Canterbury Rams versus Taranaki Mountaineers. 2 undefeated teams coming into this one. So cracker there with that second game in the NZNBL. 3 teams so far are undefeated: the Rams, the Nuggets, and the Airs. So 2 of those go head-to-head tonight. Moving on then, and let's start off with, let's get into our coronavirus news then this evening. American Danny McCarthy has withdrawn from the Travelers Championship before the second round started because he tested positive for coronavirus. He said he was feeling pretty tired after the round. Didn't think much of it as he practiced a lot on Monday and Wednesday. But there you go. So he is he's pulled out. His playing partners were Matt Wallace and Bud Corley, and have both tested negative. But Bud Corley has pulled out as well as a precaution. All the players, caddies, tested negative. Now this comes on top of other players who tested positive prior to the tournament and had to pull out, plus also Brooks Kapia and Graham McDowell, who withdrew because their caddies had tested positive, so they withdrew as. So yeah, the number of withdrawals are racking up. Tim Wilkinson from New Zealand is tied 61st at 2 under for the. Let me just 3 under for the tournament so far, and New Zealander Danny Lee is tied 83rd at 2 under for the tournament. He's 1 over for the round in round 3, and Tim Wilkinson's 2 under in round 3. So both those guys taking part in that, and we'll keep you up to date with how they are travelling. Over in the NBA, which is supposed to be resuming soon, they tested 302 players, 16 of which tested positive. They will now obviously go into self-isolation and need to be cleared by a physician before they can return. Individual workouts start on the 1st of July, and the teams will start arriving in that Disney World Resort on the 7th of July before the pre-season training camps take place from the 9th to the 29th of July, and before they get back into actually. So yes, all of that is to be held down in Florida. Obviously, they need to get some negative tests before then. Talking of positive tests, and Goran Ivanisevic has also tested positive. He is Novak Djokovic's coach. So yes, another person involved in those tennis tournaments held. Well, the first one held in Serbia, which attracted 4,000 fans. The second one taking part in Croatia, where the players and also Ivanisevic were pictured taking part in basketball, which was a contact or a close proximity sport compared to tennis. So yes, clearly another person as part of that cluster down there. You have now started the day the best way, up to date with all the important sports news. Don't forget you can listen to New Zealand Sports Radio on the go. Just download the I've gone blank. Just download the podcast via iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcatcher. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio. Have a wonderful weekend, folks, even if it is a little bit wet.